Yes, everyone, what's going on? Well, welcome back to the channel, Stephen Howson. Hope everyone's having a wonderful Thursday afternoon. What are you up to? Are you doing anything, or are you just skiving on YouTube? Not that I'm asked, because it's nice of you to join us. Obviously, we'll have match reaction after the game, so make sure to come back and get in the mix on that. And I'll see you after that as well. But I want to talk to you about why skiving on YouTube, says Jacob. Thought so. Also wearing a white t-shirt, says Notch. Well, my t-shirt is actually not white. It just looks very bright. But you ready for this? Right? Who is the first person you think of when you see the following word? I'll show you again, just for those who can't see. Govern shipbuilding. Think about it. Think about it. Think about it. Shout out to Finiston. Sir Alex, correct, said Daniel Riley. Correct. Govern shipbuilding was where Sir Alex was an apprentice. Must be like how Sean Connery would probably tell him he was an apprentice. But yeah, so not just a white. It's actually much more cream, but it looks very white. I guess the white balance isn't quite on it here. But there you go. Right, let's talk about why Europa League is better than the Champions League. And obviously, what's this going to mean for us with the dropouts that we've got? So obviously, the Europa League draw is on the 7th of November. We're going to find out who we've got in the next round. If we fail to beat Sociedad and top the group, here's some of the teams that we can face. And honestly, this is mental. So we've got Barcelona. They're currently second in La Liga. You've got the likes of Frankie de Jong, who didn't join United because he wanted to play Champions League football. How ironic. You've got the likes of Gary Golski. Has Gary Golski ever played Europa League? I'd be surprised if he has played Europa League, but he might have done in the Dortmund days. Because Bayern Munich, I don't think have played, have they? Anyway, and Pedri, who's flying at the moment as well. Great team and seemingly a decent manager. However, it's not going correct for him. Obviously, second in La Liga, so it's not going that bad for him all over the place. But yeah, meeting with de Jong would be very interesting, considering how nice it'd be to actually see him at Old Trafford, albeit in a different team. But yeah, we've got Barcelona. We got Juventus. Juventus aren't having a good season by contrast. They're 7th in Serie A. They've obviously boshed out of the Champions League. Pogba supposedly going to be injured and out of the World Cup, but they've got Chiesa, who's a hell of a player. Vlahovic, hell of a player. Be nice to play against Pogba, assuming he'd be fit by then. Almost makes it worth finishing second to sort of give him a bit of shit, I guess. Vlahovic, Chiesa, top talents. It'd be a difficult game for sure. And Di Maria's there as well. I'd love to get one over Di Maria because honestly, I don't fucking like Di Maria. Do you want me to be honest? I don't like him. Then we've also got Arsenal. We can draw Arsenal. First in the Premier League currently. You obviously know all about their players. We've beaten them already. And they've picked up results, but the performances aren't there. And they've started to taper off a little bit. Probably going to be considered favourites along with ourselves, Barcelona and Juventus, I would think. But then you've got some more interesting ties as well. Now, Ajax, first in Eredivisie. Obviously, so much history between half of our team plus our manager and themselves. Timber, Alvarez, two players that we would probably do very well if we had. Ten Hag's old team, obviously, so there'd be a lot up for that to get one back over on him. Bergwijn's over there, Tadic doing bits. And like I said, first in Eredivisie. And then another first. Now, much like Arsenal are sort of top of the tree and no one really knows why, it's even madder in Germany because Union Berlin are a team that we can face. And they're currently first in Bundesliga, ahead of Bayern and Dortmund. What? Union Berlin, they don't know how they got there. They got Becker, who's top scorer with 6 and 4 assists. You've got a potential Leicester sort of season on the cards with Union Berlin do not know why they are there. Europa League might screw them up a little bit, maybe. Now they're in it. Then you got Real Betis, undefeated in their Europa group, but have crashed out of the thingy. So 4th in La Liga. Some good players in there as well. Fekir, Carvalho. Seem to be a really decent team, but we probably should still beat them without too much of a challenge. And then you got a handful of others which are just more awkward than anything else. Bayer Leverkusen, they've shit the bed this year. They're 16th in Bundesliga. You've got Sevilla, they're 18th in La Liga. Shakhtar, 2nd in Ukrainian division. You've got Sporting, they're 6th in Portuguese league. You've got Salzburg, 1st in the Bundesliga, Austria. You would still say that United have got to be one of the favourites for this. But the last time we were in it, we were also the favourites, and we didn't win it. Teams like Barcelona and Juventus dropping in, and Arsenal obviously going through, it's going to be a lot more difficult than it has been previously. It would be a lot easier for us to finish top of our group, get that little bit of a week off as well, avoid that first knockout round against teams where there's potential for upsets. I still fancy United to be capable of beating every single team in this competition, but there's some real tasty teams in this competitions, and some that you just think there's other factors why this game would go in a different way, I think. And obviously every team that's dropped into the competition from the Champions League, it's not because they're doing mega. Something's gone wrong. Whether that's form, whether that's a monetary issue, whatever it is, there are reasons for United to be fancying themselves, especially the way we've started as well. Henk says Ajax aren't in a great spot at the moment. Sunstrider says Becker is a former Ajax graduate. Didn't know that. Thank you. Worst tie could be Salzburg, says Notch. That Salzburg could be an interesting one, actually. Do we top the group if we win 2-1 tonight? I think it has to be 2 clear goals, but I could be wrong on that one, to be honest with you. Edu says it's mad that no one's talking about how... Hang on, I can't read the rest of that. It's underneath the thingy. How Atletico, I'm assuming it means ATM, I'm assuming it means Atletico totally shit the bed with their European campaign. Glenn says Juve are there for the taking. John says Union Berlin seems to be the team on the up, so there's probably something in that. Must win by 2 clear goals, says Ultra 67. Least worst. Manu says we have to win, scoring 2 or more goals. Yeah, that's it, yeah. Ant says, can't dismiss Ajax's desire to smash us due to taking their manager and best players. No, that's always a factor that you've got to look into for sure. I've got a Russian name, so apologies, I have no idea how to pronounce that. Arsenal being top of the Premier League is because they had no European comps last year. Decent summer transfer window and favourable fixtures in the Premier League this season. It's a matter of time to drop points. I agree on that. They got a decent starting 11, but outside of that starting 11, I think it's pretty gash. Mitt says, I'd like Ajax just to shut their boss up about being smug playing in the Champions League early in the season. That's a good point. Serious Lee says, would love Ajax. Abdul says, why do some people want a difficult game? Look, you got to beat everyone in the competition to win it anyway, on some level. So, you know what I mean? Glenn says, what do you think, Steve? How are we going to do? I would expect United to hit the semis, and then it could just be a who's available and how's it going to go and are we in form at the time, because you do require a level of form, I think. Liam says, do I think CR7 has played his last United game? No. But I don't know if he'll play any more past November this year. Charlie says, so potentially the last 8 of the Europa League could be United, Arsenal, Barcelona, Juve, Ajax, Roma, Sevilla and Lazio. Yeah, theoretically, yeah. Not just hope the players will be up for it against the name alone, or the likes of Juve could catch us out. Absolutely, yeah. Like, once you start getting into the knockout stages, there's rarely someone who's there by accident. Rarely is there somebody there by accident. And everyone is capable. Like, United have lost to some right gash teams, even this season. Sometimes it happens, doesn't it? So, and, like, we struggle to score against... Sheriff and Ammonia. Let's have it right. It wasn't the easiest games that we had against both of those teams, so you better believe that some better teams can absolutely put us on the back foot a little bit more. 100% that could happen. Derek says, would love to face Barcelona and smash them to prove Frankie that we've got something great going on. Yeah, I'd agree on that, with Frankie, I don't have anything against Frankie, but I'm starting to dislike Barcelona in a big way. when you think about how wanked off they've been in terms of, I personally think that the Ballon d'Or favours Barcelona and Real Madrid in a big way. You see their players picking it up when they didn't do anything on the international or European stage, where outside of Barcelona and Real Madrid players, you've got to do an absolute madness for you to pick it up. Like when Carvalho won it, like that was because he was the captain of Italy who just won the World Cup. They weigh heavy on on world stage stuff. So like World Cups and international tournaments weigh a bit heavy for me on the voting. But also I think that because the voting is done by journalists, I think there's a popularity thing about them. So journalists are going to watch more Barcelona Real Madrid games because they're easily accessible, and they're obviously a little bit more entertaining than watching, some lower level fixtures. And obviously the teams that are going to feature heavily in the back end of the Champions League are going to get watched more, and then you've obviously got the teams that are going to go the distance in international competitions get watched even more. But I think that the voting is heavily weighed to the likes of Barcelona. When you look at some of the absolute wonderful footballers Barcelona have had up and down the years, fan base is a fucking set of absolute tosspots. From Cruyff to Maradona to R9 to Ronaldinho. Obviously what they had going on with Messi, Xavi and Iniesta, Neymar. They've been absolutely spoiled. And I think the way their fan base acts and the way their club has acted and the way their club is trying to force through the European Super League stuff, because of the fact that they're $1 billion in debt, they allowed their wages to spiral out of control with Messi. And some people might say, well, he's worth it, and I'm not necessarily going to disagree with you, but their wages spiraled out of control. And every time Messi got a pay rise, the entire rest of the squad went and got a pay rise. And now they're in a mix where they're basically a team of $3 billion. Got $1 billion in revenue, $1 billion in expenses, and $1 billion in debt. And no one's pulling them up on it. But it's financial doping in the same way as having an oligarchy bail you out. Just because it's the bank that's giving you this money that you never have to pay back doesn't make it any better than having an oligarchy come in. And this is supposedly a club that's fan-owned. And actually, the directors of Barcelona are supposed to give personal guarantees that when the club loses money, they're supposed to be able to pay it back. So the club should never actually lose its money, but that's never actually happened. And obviously, the way their presidential votes go, it's kind of ruined it. They've gone in the last 15 years from being the club that had UNICEF on the front of their shirts and paid UNICEF for the privilege of putting them on their shirts, being a team that featured, 6, 7 academy graduates in the team that won the Champions League, to being a team of mercenaries that can't field any of its homegrown players anymore, $1 billion in debt, spiraling out of control with wages, buying absolute dickheads for $150 million. Even the fact that they signed Luis Suarez, for me, Barcelona was one of those places where when you hear about how they raised the likes of Messi and Iniesta and Xavi, that they favoured nice boys, is what they called it, over superstars. And now they've even sold off. So obviously, Stratford Paddock is a fan-owned club. I give it up. It was mine. I give it up and give it to the fans. And it's in the covenant of the club that will be like this forever until the day that we close it down, if we ever close it down. If it's closed down in my lifetime. Hopefully not. But a fan-owned club can't be bought. That's the whole point of it. Like, it's owned by its members. That's it. No one can buy it. But they've just sold, I think, 18% to a Saudi Arabian businessman. How can you do that on a fan-owned club? It's a madness to me, the way that football club has been allowed to run and how it just keeps pushing for European Super League. What made Barcelona... I genuinely thought Barcelona was a special club, and Was I jealous of some of the superstars they've had playing for them and how they win Champions League with so many homegrown products? You absolutely better believe I was. Of course I was. That, to me, was how you run a football club. They never had a sponsor on their shirt. They never took sponsorship money in that sense. They were above it, almost. They'd take UNICEF and actually pay UNICEF for putting them on the front of their shirts. And then, I can't remember who the first one. It was Qatar Airways. Qatar Airways come in and like, anyway, UNICEF can get the fuck on the back of the shirt and let's take some of that fucking Qatar Airways money. Piss take the way that club's been run. And it matters as a United fan because we share competitions with these. We share the market with these. They've gained an unfair advantage by doing what they've done with the banks. Now, we're 700 or 800 million in debt ourselves. But we're not 700 or 800 million in debt because of what's going on the football pitch. Like, we've not gone bananas, paid someone £2.5 million a week, spent 180 million on shit players. I mean, we have. But that's not the reason we're in debt. The reason we're in debt is our owners. Manchester United have continued to spend money on players that the club has earned. We haven't run up. I mean, they've earned a billion a year. 999 million euros, if you want to get technical. It's $1 billion in dollars. They've been bringing in $1 billion, and their expenses was still $1 billion. And yeah, they've sold all these levers, so they're now getting 25% less income per season for the next 25 seasons because they've already sold that money off for a big wad up front. They're playing with house money when the house ain't going to be here in 25 years. I am almost certain, without massive foreign investment, probably from a nation state or the European Super League, Barcelona are fucked. Like, proper fucked. They can't sustain themselves on this. What's my favourite sandwich? One with all the meat in it. Norfolk and Good says, so question remains, what's going to happen to Frankie? Well, who knows what's going to happen to Frankie? Who knows what's going to happen to any of these players? So Barcelona are teetering on such a precipice with how much debt they're in. Europa League ain't going to cut it for them. At most of the games in Barcelona, your average game is a 20,000 attendance. Obviously, El Clasico sells out, but most of the fans aren't going to those games. There's a ticket exchange in Barcelona where the local fans give tourists their tickets, and it's at a big markup as well. And the club actually makes some money on them doing that, so that it's allowed. And that's what. Well, that's one of the reasons why they're going to be in trouble. Is people are going to give their season tickets back or not use their season tickets for Europa games. I don't think Barcelona fans are going to go to the Europa games. Ed says Barcelona feeling like a noughties Leeds. Oh yeah. What happened to Leeds in the 2000s? One of the big problems with the Glazers was we was worried that was going to happen. We was worried that if this TV bubble bursts, and believe me, it's going to burst, right? There is a worldwide recession on the cards. Player wages keep going up. Player wages don't come down. Transfer fees keep going up. They don't come down. What you're going to see is either loads more clubs end up in debt, or some clubs are just going to have to look for another model. They're going to have to look for another model. It's unsustainable football at the moment at the top end. The TV money has gone exponential. Like, I think it was somewhere in the region of like 20 million the first season of the Premier League. In fact, do you know what? Let's have a Google. And one of the reasons why Barcelona and Real Madrid were able to become so competitive, at least with each other, and the rest of the European clubs, was partly because... so, right, here we go. So from 92 to 97, the value of the 5-year deal was 304 million. So let me just work that out across the clubs. So, and it's a bit messed up because I think there's 22 clubs at the start of the Premier League, and then they dropped it down to 20. So I'll do it over 20. So it'll be overcooked just a little bit. So 304 about 5 divided by 20 equals. You got 3 million each. Oh, I guess if it was divided equally at that time, you got 3 million each. The current deal, which runs till 2025, I can't even. I don't think I could do billions on the calculator. I can't do billions on the calculator. It's 5 billion over. It's 5 billion over 3 years. What? What the fuck? It can't continue to rise like that. It cannot continue to rise like that. So the cost per game, at least, anyway, was 600 grand back in 92. Now it's 7.2 million. The way it's gone up. Amir says, I'm making the argument for why Super League is inevitable. Yeah, I understand why the clubs want Super League. As a fan, I think it's the worst idea I have ever heard. Actually, TV revenue peaked at 10.2 million per game. 504 games. Jesus. Wow. Yeah, I think that when you think about this, right, advertisers are going to have less money to spend because they're just going to be making less profit, unless they're BP, who are having our arse at the moment. Advertisers are going to have less money to spend, so they're going to give less money to the TV companies, which means the TV companies have to give less to the football companies, and the only way they might be able to do this is I can probably see a point where they go, actually, fuck the 3 p.m. blackout write-off, and let's broadcast them games as well. And that way, the money might not have to go down, which you're getting, but more games will end up televised. So it might stay at 5.1 billion for all of the games, but there might be more games televised. So your price per game comes down because it peaked at 10.2 million between 2016 and 2019, and then from 2019 to 2022, it's actually gone down to 7.2 million per game. So I think you're just going to maybe squeeze how many games there are without, because they'll absolutely boot off if the amount of money goes down, because that'll be unsustainable to them because they're not going to be able to operate with less money coming in. So I think if you just say, look, we'll give you more games, but we'll drop the amount of money down, that might be how they do it. I think that's the one. Jungle is Massive says, have I had my head under a rock? There is a model to combat unsustainable. It's called the Super League and it'll be back soon. Well, obviously not. No, I'm well aware of what's going on now. Why am I not on Paddock anymore? Why aren't you opening your fucking eyes, mate? Ed says 3 p.m. blackout defo gone in the next 2 years. Mankey says never really knew the reason for the 3 p.m. blackout was. Okay, so there's still people arguing for the 3 p.m. blackout. And they've eradicated it, I think, up until the championship, or it's coming in where it'll be championship games will be allowed to be played. There's still people arguing for it, but there is no fucking evidence for it whatsoever. Now, I got blocked by Michael Cox, who I think is actually a very good journalist, but he blocked me, and I was respectful. I wasn't calling him a dick or anything. He just blocked me because he couldn't answer me. He called me an internet person. I'm like, what the fuck is an internet person? Because he was saying, let's say United play Chelsea away. He was expecting the 75,000 people that would have watched United if we was at home would all go and watch Altrincham, Stalybridge Celtic, blah, 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 blah. And I said, well, can you show me the evidence in people's in those clubs' attendance for that, please? And he couldn't. And I was asking him, so do you think like the 2,500 people that get a ticket for Chelsea away are the only people in this country that are going to watch that game? And he said, yes. I said, you're off your head. Now, he thought, because I'm an internet person and allegedly young, that I know how to stream it. My next door neighbour's in his 80s. Shout out to Wilf, right? Wilf streams the games. Wilf was telling me, got to get one of these Got one of these Fire Sticks, lad. Get all the fucking games on it. He was telling me how to do it. Like, incredibly disrespectful. I mean, Wilson in his 80s, like, incredibly disrespectful to the older generation thing that they don't know how to fucking operate a computer or know how to stream stuff. And also, incredibly ignorant to not understand just how many games get streamed. People aren't going watching Altrincham unless they've got some sort of affinity with them because United are playing away at the exact same time. It was done to protect the attendances of lower leagues. But there is no fucking evidence whatsoever to suggest that that 3 p.m. blackout actually works. None whatsoever. At the moment, non-league is thriving when there's more games on TV than there ever has been. And non-league and even lower league is thriving. There are more people watching live sport in this country than ever before. You got non-league teams getting 5 figures watching them. You're getting bottom half of non-league, steps 5, 6, 4, where there's regularly 4 figures of people watching them. Because people like live sport. And they will go to that live sport. But Manchester United fans are not in their droves going to go and watch fucking Stalybridge Celtic or Salford just because United are playing Chelsea that weekend. Nor are the only people that are going to watch United and Chelsea that are United fans that weekend the ones that are in the away end at fucking Stamford Bridge. Utter nonsense. And the reason that they've kept this in place is to protect attendances. Now, when the original TV ban was lifted in the 80s, I believe, I've only read this, I was a child and I was a toddler, so I'm not sure the exact score with this. When they first started broadcasting matches, I believe it was when the top flight First Division was sponsored by Canon. Not, you probably know the answer to this. They only used to broadcast the second half of games because they thought if they broadcast the full game, no one would go to any games and they would just sit and watch whatever game was on. Look how wrong they were. Look at the growth of attendances since Sky TV started putting it on. Now, Sky TV's brought a lot of negative things, in my opinion, and not just Sky, all of the live TV stuff has brought a lot of negatives. And it's brought a lot of positives in terms of, like, you know, stadiums are safer, they're nicer places to be, they don't stink of piss the way they used to in the late 80s. But there is fucking zero evidence to suggest that having any sort of blackout of any games does any good whatsoever. And I would say the converse thing is true. The reason Manchester United gained a worldwide following in the early 90s because they was very often on Sky TV and exposing themselves to a wider audience. How are you going to turn up and know who Barnsley are? Because Barnsley's games aren't getting moved for telly all the time. How... If Barnsley's games was on TV and you're in some random farm in Texas and you just happen to turn on, you go, do you know what? I fucking like these. Exposure to those teams allows those teams to get a following. Exposure to those teams at 3 o'clock allows them to get a worldwide following. Now, there's an infinite number of people living in Barnsley. But you've got the access to the entire world if you want to give that team access to its live games. And you never know if you have a good marketing team and a good social media team that you can fucking get a following worldwide. Look at look at the progress that's been made by Salford. We're like 2 years off being where Salford were when the Class of 92 took them over. They're now a League 2 team and they will be a championship team within 5 years. I absolutely guarantee it. That's the difference, and that team has grown a following. Yes, David Beckham owns them. Yes, Gary Neville owns them. Ryan Giggs owns them. Nicky Butt owns them. And that's a huge advantage for any football club to have. You've got Ryan Reynolds owning Wrexham. Most people wouldn't give a fuck about Wrexham, but because they're making very good content, and Ryan Reynolds is an interesting guy, you now give half a fuck about Wrexham. If you've seen the documentary on Robbie Savage and what he's doing with Macclesfield, you'll give a fuck about what's going on at Macclesfield. Many people will have strong feelings, pro or negative, to FC United, but you've got an opinion on them. There's nothing worse than just having no opinion. I don't give a fuck. Bishop Stratford, who are they? Who cares? Do you know what I mean? And FC United have got a massive fan base, probably largely because of that. Oldham have just dropped into the National League. There's a story there. I believe it's the first Premier League team, or the first team that's played in the Premier League that has fell out of the professional leagues. There's a story there. There's so many teams that could capture the imagination if you just fucking let them be seen by people. Highlight shows ain't doing dick. You need to know the story. Ultra167 says, used to listen to a live game on the radio with CFAX on TV, the good old days. Edu says, this Europa campaign is definitely going to be interesting. Oh yeah, we were talking about Europa, weren't we? Little bit of waffle says, don't think you're right about only showing the second half in the 80s. When live sport came in, apart from the FA Cup final, what they started to show, definitely, and I'll have to find... It's in the book called The Club by Jonathan Clegg. It's in that book. I'll have to find the passage where he talks about it, but it was only the second half that was allowed to be shown of league matches. FA Cups they was allowed to show. I don't know if that was all the rounds or just the final, but that was part of the reason why the FA Cup was such a national treasure of an event, because it was one of the only games that you got to watch in full. Mike says, afternoon, hope you're well. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Are you? Mark says, not sure if we win by the 2 goals this evening in Spain, but it'd be a big statement. Totally agree on that. Brian says, I can't see why anyone outside of Barnsley would support them. Well, why not? There's people in this chat that aren't in Manchester that support United. What's wrong with that? There's people worldwide that support my fucking little Saturday afternoon pub team. What's wrong with that? It doesn't matter where you're from. It's about if you can create some sort of a connection with that place. And if you can create a connection with fucking Barnsley, I mean, fair play to you if you can. Some people definitely can. I guarantee it, if I'm going to Google it right this now, I'm going to Google Barnsley Supporters Club. And I bet there's like a fucking Boston Barnsley Supporters Club or something. Barnsley Supporters Clubs. Let's have a look. London Tykes. So at least they've got one in London. They haven't got many. They've got Penistone, Barnsley FC Supporters Club, and then London Tykes. But there you go. Why the fuck would anyone from London support Barnsley? But they clearly do. So, do you know what I mean? If you give people access to watch a club, they can grow an affinity to it. Especially when people like there's all of us here are people that are involved in supporting football clubs, and I imagine 99% of the people in the comments right now are United fans, and hence that's why you're watching me. But there's people that are new to football all the time. There's people whose parents liked fucking cricket or ice hockey or curling or dogging and whatever the fuck it was that they did at a weekend, right? But there's people that are discovering football for themselves all the time. And they don't have someone dragging them in a fucking headlock to Old Trafford when they're 5 years old, the way some of us were lucky enough to be. So they have to discover a team on their own, and one of them might discover fucking Barnsley, man. Dig Amber says there are Newcastle fans in Nepal. I'm sure there is. There are random as fuck fans all over the gaff. All over the gaff. Now, yes, big clubs are going to have more. Of course they are. It's just nature. But there was a kid I went to school with that supported Sheffield Wednesday because he wanted to be fucking different. And to be fair, Sheffield Wednesday had a decent team at the time. I think it was the Reggie Blinker, Paolo Di Canio sort of era. So, it doesn't matter what it is. You might be a massive Paolo Di Canio fan, or might have been a massive Paolo Di Canio fan, and then you see him at Sheffield Wednesday and you go, I'm a fucking Sheffield Wednesday fan now, because he might have been the first thing that you latched onto. There's a million different journeys where people can pick up on clubs. Jibak in there with a super chat says, I've got a soft spot for Oxford United because I played them in Championship Manager 102 while living in India. You can't predict how these things happen. Correct. Grimsby Town have a fan club in Malta, says Sam. Do you know what I mean? Fucking, do you know what I mean? And then you've got, I played Footy Manager as Cheltenham all the time. I can't help myself have a look how Cheltenham are getting on. Richie Wellens was a fucking... This must have been 2004, 2005, something like that. Kennedy says, I grew up without a football influence in my family. I started supporting United when I was 7 because a girl I liked supported United. There's no fucking way of knowing where your path starts into supporting a club. We had a player called Paul Arrow come and play for the club. He played a few games for the first team. He was mostly played in the reserves. He didn't know we was a real football club. He just bought the shirt because he liked the shirt. Then he ended up playing for us. And I'm sure there's some random ass people that have ended up supporting Paddock for no fucking good reason. It happens. Rory says, I'm from Ireland, come from a United family, so I had no choice. First game was 1986, United versus Derby County. Yeah, loads of it. If you've got uncles, granddads, aunties, whatever, or parents that are United fans, very strong correlation that you're going to be a United fan. Ghost Up Ghost says, used to play Tranmere on Footy Manager and now always keep an eye out for them. Ultra says, I'm based in Grimsby, used to be a good cup side, as Liverpool and Everton. Sam says, started my FIFA 06 manager career mode as Yeovil back in the day. Always have a sneak peek how they're getting on despite being from nowhere near there. This is how it can happen. Someone might, this is 2022, right? Someone might play FIFA and end up supporting a team that they like playing with on FIFA. You never know. Mark says, lifelong United fan from Manchester, but also into my basketball. Fan of Toronto Raptors due to family. Yeah, same principle. Jake says, my brother was a United fan. I was a Madridista and slowly became a United fan. Carl says, my brother got me into United and we watched the 1991 Cup Winners' Cup final together in Ireland. It was Liverpool or United. Thank God I ended up supporting. That's it. Jai says, why do I think Sanchez isn't in the right headspace to ball out how we know he can? Really don't know. Really don't know what's going on with him. I would love to know because I think he could be sensational for us. But yeah. IR says, bit random, but anyone know anyone going to the World Cup? I'm going, and I think I'm taking Ronaldo with me as well. Aidan says, my mate Jack lives in Northampton, but went on holiday to Milan as a kid and has supported him since. Do Paddock have proper fans where it's their first team? No, I don't think we do just yet. No. Look, my vision for what Stratford Paddock is going to become will switch. As soon as we get our own place, my focus on what the club is will switch. And I think that might be when people become fans of the football club first. At the moment, there's a myriad of reasons why people have been drawn to the team. But when we get our own facilities, it will go from being a first team with a couple of others to being a junior team that has a men's team. I want 100 teams, 1,600 kids. That's what I'm looking to try and build in the junior section. And that junior section will be high-level coaching, everyone UEFA B or higher, people getting paid to coach, therefore giving... Look, we don't want anyone's dad coaching because that's how most kids experience football. Someone who doesn't know what they're doing, isn't passionate about it, isn't educated about it, isn't working on being the best coach they can be, doesn't envisage themselves having a career. And I saw this, and I was this. I was a dad coach with limited experience. And I saw what the difference in coaching was when we had, a guy called Lee, who ended up going working for an MLS team because coaching was his profession and what he was good at. And he had about 4 or 5 teams that he was looking after in Manchester before he got a job working full-time over in the MLS. The difference in watching him coach versus watching a dad coach is drastic. And I want to build a club where we are paying coaches, and they might have half a dozen teams, and that's how they earn their living, is by being a coach. And they'll be paid via the subs of the kids. But it'll be a grounding and a football education for the kids. So they're not having to deal with someone who's just filling in because no one else was there and the team was going to fold. No, it'll have professional coaches that are there because they're trying to be professional coaches. And if there is any dads who want to be coaches, we can put them on courses and we can help them shadow someone who is a good coach so they can get a good education as well. And ultimately, that's what it will be. It will be a place where people come and get their initial football education. You can't have a kid and then take him to Carrington, knock on a door, pay a tenner a week in subs and let United train him. It doesn't work like that. That kid has to get a football education somewhere. And whether or not we're creating Manchester United and England players is irrelevant. What you're doing is creating a community. And some of those kids are going to go and watch the Paddock first team because they play for the Paddock under-7s. And we're going to make it a cultural thing where we take those kids and they come and watch the first team with their mates. Because it's extremely difficult for kids, as groups of kids, to go and watch live football together. One, because of the expense. Two, because of the logistics. So if we can bring it in where you play on a Saturday morning with your under 11s, and then your coach is kind of babysitting your whole under 11s team at a first team game. You guys are supporting the club, watching the club, and eventually moving through the conveyor belt to go and be that club. You can have the point where you're sitting with your mates, you're creating this culture, and it doesn't matter if you end up with a career in professional football or not. You've developed this habit of going to the match with your mates, and that's what I'm looking for. And that's what we're trying to build. Jake says, if I have a kid, can Paddock train him? Not yet. Wait till we have our own facilities, and that's what we're trying to do. Marcus says, when I was younger, we had a father coach too. He barely gave any of the team attention. He just focused on his own son. It was so annoying. Ben says, yeah, I was a ball boy as a kid at 33 and now go and watch that non-league team. That's awesome. Are there still shares for Paddock for sale? It's not shares. It's a membership. But if you search Stratford Paddock fan ownership, it will come up on Google. For some reason, we can't get it into the menu on the website. But yeah, get it. You just Google that and you'll find it. John says, regarding Sancho, yet another Dortmund player who looks like a baller there, but struggled and struggling at United. Do you think there's any chance Bellingham could be another? I mean, no, you can't necessarily just say that. Sancho has looked good. It's just not been consistent enough. Nick with a super chat there says, just a random comment. Have I ever watched back some of the videos after the last game of last season? Impressive where we are now. Therapeutic almost. I've not. Jake Speaks says, Steve, the Stratford Paddock website is gash. I said, no. You missed the chat last week where I was saying, fucking, we paid someone and he's just fucked off with the money. I'm trying to sort it, but it's not easy. So I know the website is a fucking pain in the ass. If anyone can help us, get in touch. But yes, that's where we're at. But listen, cheers for tuning in. Europa League's better than the Champions League. Cool kids play on a Thursday night. We'll have to start an 11 out in just a few hours, I guess. So I'll be back after the game. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you in a bit. Laters. Hey, thank you for watching the video. If you are new around these parts, then don't forget to subscribe. My channel is proudly supported by my community on Patreon. If you'd like to get a little bit of extra content, a Discord group, meetups, five-a-side games, weekly podcasts, behind the scenes, and even an occasional bit of transfer news as and when I get it, then for the price of a pint, you can show your appreciation for the content that we make and get some goodies for doing so as well. Check the link in the description or click the button right here. You'll also find all of my socials here too if you want to follow me on any of those platforms. Nice one.